In Inigo's heart, I'm nothing more than a wife in name. In reality, I am just a stand-in for Olivia. After all, she is the high-born, beloved star and I come from humble beginnings. Inigo spent $300,000. On the day Olivia returned to the country, the topic about her was trending online. Inigo went to the airport to pick her up for a gathering. Before leaving, he only had one thing to say to me: "I won't be home for dinner tonight." I had only read for an hour when he called again. "There's a bottle of vintage red wine in the liquor cabinet. Find it and bring it to the restaurant." Just as I was getting into a state of learning, I was interrupted. I sighed, found the bottle of wine in the cabinet, and drove it to the restaurant. In the private dining room of the restaurant, lit brightly and lavishly decorated, sat Olivia and Inigo in the center, surrounded by adoration. Olivia was dressed in a shimmering silver gown, slightly leaning towards Inigo, looking intimate. Everyone was teasing, "Olivia is finally back. Inigo has been waiting for you for so long." I walked over and stood in front of Inigo. "Here's the red wine you asked for. I found it by the label, it should be the right one." I put down the bottle and turned to leave. Olivia spoke softly from behind me, "Stop. Come over, open the wine, and pour it for us." I turned my head, glancing instinctively at Inigo. He was sitting back in his chair, his shirt unbuttoned at the top, looking at me indifferently. "Don't you understand?" "I understand," I said, looking down. "I'll go out and get a corkscrew." As I stepped out, Olivia's questioning voice followed. "Is this the kind of person you like now?" Inigo remained silent. A friend defended him. "Don't be angry, Olivia. Inigo only has you in his heart." "Yeah, you can't blame Inigo. She's been clinging on persistently, impossible to shake off." After I poured the wine, Olivia refused to let me go. Suddenly, she raised her hand and splashed most of a bowl of soup on my chest, clinging to Inigo shamelessly. "How cheap can you be? Is this your way of climbing the social ladder?" The liquid soaked through my clothes, leaving a scalding pain on the surface of my skin. Inigo held Olivia's hand, gently soothing her, without giving me a second glance. "I've ordered the diamond necklace you like, don't be mad at me, okay?" A well-wishing friend mixed a full glass of various drinks and pushed it towards me. "Drink it," as an apology to Olivia. Another person complained, "Such expensive wine, it's a waste to let her drink it." In Inigo's circle of friends, Olivia was everyone's superstar. No one respected me, always finding ways to make things difficult and mock me. Inigo never intervened. Especially this time, in front of Olivia. I picked up the murky glass of mixed drinks and drank it all. The strong burning sensation of the alcohol spread from my throat to my stomach. Tears welled up in an instant. Bending over, I couldn't help but retch, supporting myself on the table. "That's enough, don't spoil our appetite, get out." Inigo casually picked up a corkscrew and tossed it to me. He didn't control his strength well, and it hit my forehead, causing a sharp pain. Blood soon started to flow, trickling down my cheek. He froze for a moment, then stood up instinctively and took a step towards me. I held my forehead, bowed, and hurriedly ran out. After returning home, I took a bath and treated the wound simply. That's when I realized Inigo had also returned. He looked very upset. I began to understand. "Did you and Olivia have a fight?" "Reina." He scolded me in a cold voice, striding over and grabbing my wrist, pinning me against the edge of the bed. I struggled to push him away, but the difference in strength between Inigo and me was like night and day. The lamp flickered, the light so harsh I instinctively closed my eyes, but tears still seeped out. He paused for a moment, grabbing my chin, forcing me to look up. "Why are you crying? Do you feel wronged? Reina, didn't you say you loved me and just wanted to stay by my side?" His kiss landed on my lips, forceful and bitter, quickly leaving a taste of sweet and metallic blood. Inigo commanded me, "Forgot everything I taught you? Close your eyes. Your eyes, they're the least like hers." In his rough movements, the pain intensified. In a moment of confusion when I opened my eyes, I met his dark and inexplicable gaze, like a release of some deep-seated emotion. Then I realized I had upset Olivia, and Inigo was punishing me. When we first met, I was a poor student, and he was a high-ranking CEO. He got drunk at the bar where I worked, looked at my face, and got angry. Stop doing such demeaning things with a face that resembles hers. Later, when my only relative, my grandmother, fell ill, I borrowed from every bank but still fell short of $300,000. For that money, I sold myself to Inigo. I threw myself at him, and in exchange, he forbade me from continuing my master's studies. A stand-in should look like a stand-in. His tone was indifferent, deciding my life in a few words. You said you liked me, right? Then stay by my side, don't go anywhere. We had no wedding, just a meal with family. Olivia had left him to study abroad. Inigo wouldn't allow the same situation to happen again. From that day, my dream of pursuing advanced studies became an unreachable dream. My grandmother didn't survive the complications after the surgery and passed away 6 months later. I sat dazed in the cemetery all night. At midnight, as the rain started to drizzle, an umbrella appeared above me. It was Inigo. He looked down at me with rare gentleness in his voice. How much longer will you stay here? I'll stay with you. We've been together for 3 years. I took meticulous care of him. There were brief moments of warmth in our interactions. But I knew, Inigo actually looked down on me. Before Olivia went abroad, she was already a popular star. Returning now, covered in glory, she was inundated with offers. She called, saying she had just returned to the country and needed a competent assistant. I think that Reina by your side is not bad, seems capable of serving well. Inigo was silent for 2 seconds. She chuckled lightly. What? Can't bear to let her go? No. Inigo said indifferently, since you need her, I'll send her over. So, I followed Olivia into the film crew. During a break, the second female lead, Rose, came over to chat. Olivia, your assistant looks quite like you. Except for the eyes. She has a mole under her eye, which makes her seem more charming than you. Rose was originally set to be the lead actress in this film, but unfortunately, Olivia's return took her role. She was displeased and deliberately said this to irritate Olivia. Indeed, Olivia's face changed, and her gaze towards me was almost undisguised loathing. After work in the afternoon, she said she lost her ring. It was still there when we shot by the lake. It must have fallen into the water. Her gaze wandered and finally settled on me. Reina, go and look for it in the lake. The water in the artificial lake was waist deep. I waded in, bending over to feel through the lake's muddy bottom. The sunset dyed the sky a bloody red. As night fell, the light dimmed inch by inch. Knowing it was Olivia's deliberate difficulty, everyone on the shore watched silently. No one would stand up for an obscure assistant. My fingers turned white and wrinkled from the cold water. Finally, when it was completely dark, the stylist spoke up. Olivia, we found your ring. It was on the makeup table. Maybe I carelessly left it there. Olivia took the ring, tossed it casually into her Hermes bag, and said, Come up, Reina. Clean yourself up, don't look like I've bullied you. After work, Inigo would come to pick her up. I sat soaking wet under a few pear trees outside the set. After a while, the black Rolls-Royce returned. Inigo got out of the car and walked over to me. Let's go home and change. I didn't look up. He softened his tone slightly. Don't blame Olivia, she's just upset and needed to vent. It's nothing. Seeing that I still didn't respond, Inigo lost his patience. That's enough, Reina. Who are you angry with? I sniffed, holding back tears, and looked up at him. Inigo, it's been 3 years, and now Olivia is back too. Let me go. Let's get a divorce. His face changed slightly. Where will you go? I picked up a canvas bag next to me and took out a document. I applied to a top foreign university for a master's in life sciences. They've already sent me an acceptance letter. Before I could finish, Inigo snatched the papers and tore them to shreds. He grabbed my wet wrist and pushed me into the car. His burning palm against my cold arm transferred warmth. Under the dim light of the car, Inigo's gaze was icy as he looked at me. "Don't even think about it. You're not allowed to go anywhere. Reina, you're my wife." After that day, I didn't go back to the set. Inigo found a new assistant for Olivia and arranged for me to work in his company as his personal assistant. "After this, you'll follow me." He fiddled with the pen in his hand, looking up at me with a slightly softened tone. "That day on the set, it was Rose who deliberately stirred up trouble between you and Olivia. I've already spoken to some people, and no one will use her in films anymore." Seeing that I showed no reaction and remained silent, Inigo's face darkened. His voice carried a warning. "Reina, don't push your luck." Was I really pushing my luck? These past few days, I've been running a low fever. Drowsy from the medicine and lacking the strength to argue with him. In the evening, after Olivia finished work, I drove Inigo to have dinner with her. As soon as she saw me, she spoke coldly. "Inigo, I don't want to fight with you, but don't bring something so distasteful that it ruins my mood." Inigo glanced at me. "Wait in the car." I nodded and walked away. On my phone was an email from the professor at the university I had applied to. "Reina, your acceptance letter has been mailed to you. When can you come to the university to register? After seeing your resume, I've applied for the highest scholarship for you. I'm looking forward to teaching such a talented and hard-working student." I clasped my hands in the air, as if trying to grasp the pieces of the acceptance letter that Inigo had torn up and thrown away. That night, Inigo didn't come home. He sent me a message. "I'm taking Olivia home. Don't wait up." "Staying over there?" He replied bluntly. "Reina, that's not your concern." I drove to the suburban cemetery where my grandmother was buried. It had been over 2 years. The photo embedded in her gravestone was taken in her last days when she was seriously ill. The money I had saved over the years, along with the loans I begrudgingly asked from teachers and classmates, still fell short by over $300,000. To Inigo, it was nothing more than the cost of a night's drinking with friends. Just another bag for a female companion. After the surgery, my grandmother held my hand, repeatedly instructing me not to take Inigo's money lightly just because it was insignificant to him. So, for 3 years, I obeyed Inigo's every command, no matter how unreasonable. But should I continue to spend the rest of my life here, sacrificing my ideals and pursuits? The cemetery was empty, with only the sound of the wind and insects. My grandmother on the tombstone looked at me silently. She would never answer me again. That afternoon, someone familiar found me. It was Rose. She had lost the pride she had on the set opposite Olivia, now looking completely disheveled. Sitting in the corner of a cafe, she asked me, "You must be angry about how Olivia treats you, right? I know you struggled to climb up to Inigo, but she ruined it all when she came back. I've got photos of her and Inigo spending the night together. Just expose them, and when you step forward as the legitimate wife, she'll be ruined. The pure white Jasmine is actually a knowing, third-rate woman. Ha." I drank a whole glass of lemon water, shook my head, and refused her. But I underestimated Rose's madness. Her pride and joy in her acting career had been destroyed by Inigo, and she had lost her reason. That night, the intimate photos of Olivia and Inigo hit the trending topics. A so-called insider revealed, "Inigo has a wife, they've been together for several years. I've seen them eating together, and that woman is definitely not Olivia." To prove her point, she even posted a photo. It was a bit blurry due to being a candid shot, but you could still make out the woman in the picture with short hair, a slim figure, and a mole under her eye. Looking at the photo, I was momentarily stunned. "Reina." I snapped back to reality as Inigo entered the room with a stern face, striding towards me. He raised his hand and slapped me, then grabbed my collar and shoved me against the edge of the table. A photo was forcefully thrown in front of me. It showed me and Rose sitting in a dimly lit corner of a cafe. His voice was icy. "What more do you want? If it wasn't for your face resembling Olivia's, when your grandmother was in the hospital, you wouldn't even have had the chance to sell yourself to me for money. And now, you conspire with others to frame Olivia. How could there be such a malicious woman like you?" The stinging pain on my cheek, the tight grip on my collar making it hard to breathe. I opened my mouth, struggling to speak. It wasn't me. I refused her. Inigo refused to believe. He gripped my chin tightly, then sneered after a moment, "Bitch." He let go and left, slamming the door, as I collapsed weakly onto the floor. The direction of the online frenzy quickly changed. Inigo's friends came forward to clarify, claiming I was not his wife. Inigo only helped her family with medical bills out of pity, but she's been clinging to him ever since, trying to seduce him. That meal in the photo was just him trying to make things clear to her. Inigo released several photos. There were ones of me working in a bar, being harassed by patrons, but shot in a way that made it look consensual. There were also pictures of Rose dining with an investor. The last one was of us in the cafe. People concluded, so, Rose was upset about losing her role, harboring a grudge, and teamed up with this nightclub girl to spread rumors? Poor Olivia. My phone number was leaked. Thousands of abusive messages flooded in. Someone even dug up my ID and demanded the school revoke my graduation and degree certificates on grounds of moral turpitude. Olivia emerged unscathed from the storm of public opinion. The next night, she gracefully posted a photo of a diamond ring on her Weibo. Engaged. The comments section was filled with congratulations, while the cyberbullying against me intensified. For several days, I dared not turn on my phone. Inigo never returned. My stomach ailment flared up, and as I was about to go to the hospital for medication, I was bundled into a white van. In an abandoned factory by the sea, I saw Olivia, also tied up. Her expensive gown was dusty and tattered, her carefully groomed, silky hair now a disheveled mess. She looked at me with hateful eyes, cursing bitterly, "It's you again." I pursed my lips. "That's my line. What right do you have to talk to me like that? Poor trash." Olivia screamed, "Inigo never loved you. If you didn't look like me, you wouldn't even qualify to be his stand-in." She had lost her composure. The always superior actress, brought here in the crudest way, confined in a dusty factory. Even a sip of clean water was a luxury. Her screams, threats, and bribes only earned her more beatings from the kidnappers. After 2 days, Rose appeared. I sighed. "I knew it was you." She looked at me with a smug smile. "You see, you think of Inigo, but he doesn't consider your situation. Now that you and Olivia are both here, if only one can be saved, I'm curious to see who he'll choose." But the answer to that question didn't really need verification. As the siren of the police cars approached from a distance, and Rose and her hired men hurriedly pushed me towards the edge of the cliff, I just calmly glanced at Inigo. He didn't even look at me, his attention solely on Olivia. "Olivia, don't be afraid." The usually haughty Olivia was in tears. She sobbed, repeatedly calling out Inigo's name. "Save me, Inigo." Rose asked me, "Aren't you going to struggle?" "No." I said softly, "I'm tired." They seemed to say something else, probably negotiating terms. My stomach hurt more and more, and cold sweat covered my forehead and back. Finally, I heard Inigo's voice. He called out to me, "Reina. I'll save you too, just look at me. Lift your head, look at me." I didn't look up, only hearing Rose's cold laugh. "Don't be so optimistic. Inigo, I worked hard for years to get to where I am, and you destroyed it. You must pay the price." Suddenly, a force pushed me from behind. My body lightened, then came the sensation of falling, the white waves below getting closer and closer. Olivia's screams became fainter and fainter. I belatedly realized, she pushed both me and Olivia down. Before being swallowed by the sea, I heard Inigo calling my name for the last time. It was a voice filled with immense panic and despair. Reina. Years later. As the plane landed, I removed my eye mask and retrieved my suitcase from the overhead compartment. The hotel I was staying in was arranged by the event organizers, with the hall just downstairs. When I arrived, the venue was already bustling. I had previously collaborated with Kim on a project, so we were somewhat familiar. She asked me, "Did you know? Today, several big bosses are also invited to the event. Apparently, there are some projects with commercial interests." She hadn't finished speaking when someone enthusiastically greeted someone in the distance. "He's here too." Inigo nodded slightly. "Yes, just here to take a look." Kim noticed and changed the subject. "That man is Inigo. He used to be in entertainment and IT, but these past 2 years, for some reason, he started investing in biotech and pharmaceutical projects." I smiled. "Is that so?" She nodded, continuing her gossip. "Yeah, do you know about his fiancée? Olivia, she used to be a top actress. A couple of years ago, for some reason, she went for plastic surgery." As she spoke, Inigo and his entourage had already approached us. "Inigo, this is our special guest invited back from abroad, Dr. Reina from Michigan State University, a cell biology expert." Under the bright chandelier, Inigo's indifferent gaze swept over, then suddenly fixated on my face. The people around us quickly sensed something amiss. But he seemed oblivious, his eyes reddening as he looked at me. "I knew you weren't dead. I've been searching for you." I stepped back, avoiding his outstretched hand. "Sorry, who are you?" The atmosphere turned tense. Finally, a staff member came over to smooth things over, politely escorting him away. Inigo took his seat in the VIP area, his gaze piercing through the crowd, fixed on me, unwilling to look away. Kim curiously asked, "Do you know him?" "No, I don't." The event proceeded smoothly. Towards the end, a staff member from Mingcheng Biosciences Institute announced the list of specially appointed doctors, and my name was prominently listed. Reina. I went on stage to deliver a few remarks. For a moment, my gaze met Inigo's in midair. In the coming years, I will stay in S-City, hoping to engage in academic exchanges with my peers. After bowing and stepping down, I returned to sit beside Kim. Suddenly, she slapped her thigh. "I remember now. Reina, you and Inigo's ex-fiancée, Olivia before her plastic surgery, looked quite alike. He probably mistook you for Olivia." I finally laughed genuinely. "I guess so." After the event, unsurprisingly, I saw Inigo's Rolls-Royce parked outside the hotel. He was leaning against the car, gazing at me almost yearningly. "Reina." I nodded politely. "Inigo." A hint of pain flashed in his eyes. "You hate me, don't you?" "Don't think like that." I sighed. "I have to go now." "Don't leave." He reached out and grabbed the hem of my coat, his voice trembling, almost pleading. "That day at the cliff. I didn't mean not to save you. I just instinctively grabbed Olivia. Later, I sent people to look for you. They said that with your hands tied and the steepness of the cliff, chances of survival were slim." I glanced at my watch. It was getting late, and I didn't want to spend my first day back standing on the roadside listening to his confessions. So, I politely smiled and interrupted him. "Sorry, I have to go. I have another engagement." "Where are you going?" he asked. Just then, a bright orange Porsche pulled up next to us. The driver got out and opened the door. "Ivy has already booked a restaurant. She asked me to pick you up." Inigo's face turned pale as he watched me get into the car. As the door was about to close, he suddenly put his hand out to stop it, asking, "Who's Ivy?" "That doesn't seem to concern you, does it?" I forced a smile, my gaze falling on the Rolls-Royce behind him, and couldn't help but make a jibe. "After all these years, still driving the same Rolls-Royce, Mr. CEO? Doesn't that seem a bit out of character?" The car drove off, and through the rearview mirror, I could still see him standing there silently, watching me. At the Sky Garden restaurant in the city center, Ivy was waiting for me. Leaning back in her wheelchair, she lazily looked at me. "Did you meet Inigo?" I briefly recounted the encounter, ending with self-criticism. That last remark was a bit harsh. Harsh? I think it wasn't harsh enough. She flipped through the menu, casually ordered a couple of dishes, then handed the menu to me. Next time you see him, make sure to give him a taste of his own medicine. Kim curiously asked, "Do you know him?" "Not really," I replied, propping my arms on the table. "You really dislike him, don't you?" "Of course, I do. While you were abroad for your master's and PhD, I was here in a power struggle with him, snatching several projects from him. Every time you underwent a corrective surgery, I made sure Olivia got a trending negative spotlight. I had emailed my advisor saying the admission letter was lost. He said it was no issue, as long as I showed up to enroll. Ivy helped me change my name, get a new ID, and then took me to the hospital. My wrist bore fine scars from cutting the ropes, and my arm, broken from the fall, had been injured along with my cheek, almost grinding to the bone. After several surgeries, I finally recovered. Each healing period was long and painful. "Do you know how I broke my leg?" Ivy asked me. She was 10 years older than me. As a young woman, she too had her own aspirations. Her parents left the family business to her brother but forced her into a strategic marriage when the company was in crisis. Nonchalantly, she added, "Since the company needed my sacrifice to stay afloat, I might as well take over." Her leg was broken when her infuriated brother pushed her down the stairs. That night, as we sat facing each other on the balcony, she covered my hand with hers, sighing softly, "I wish I had met you sooner. You wouldn't have had to waste 3 precious years of your life for a mere $300,000 on him." After dinner, I bid Ivy goodbye. I had just joined the research institute when Inigo showed up again. He found me in the cafeteria, sitting across from me, staring at the corner of my right eye for a long time. After a while, he asked softly, "Where's your teardrop mole?" "Oh," I responded casually, "I got hurt when I fell from the cliff." The reconstructive surgery changed my appearance a bit. His hand on the table began to tremble. "Did it hurt?" he asked. It was an absurd question. I put down my chopsticks, looked up at him calmly, and said, "Inigo, you're the last person who should be asking me that. The pain I endured during those 3 years with you, perhaps you've forgotten, but I remember very clearly." Abusers often easily forget the harm they've caused. As I made eye contact with Inigo, I listed his wrongs on my fingers. "The time I had a 39-degree fever, Olivia hung up on you, and you took your anger out on me. Saying I felt comfortable to hold when I was feverish. When I went out with you and your friends, they forced me to drink until I vomited blood. You made me take a cab to the hospital alone. I had to undergo an endoscopy without anesthesia because no one was there to sign for me. When Olivia got negative press from Rose, you accused me of orchestrating it, called me a third-rate woman, and slapped me twice. And many more times. I got used to it, so the surgery to fix my wounds didn't hurt that much." With each revelation, his face grew paler. In the end, the always aloof and dignified Inigo, in front of me, shed tears. I felt a bit embarrassed and looked around to see if anyone was watching. "Inigo, stop this nonsense," I said, supporting myself on the table. "You really despise him, don't you?" "Of course, I do. While you were studying abroad for your master's and PhD, I was back here battling him, snatching several projects from him. Every time you had a corrective surgery, I made sure Olivia got hit with a negative spotlight. I had emailed my professor saying the admission letter was lost. He reassured me that it was fine as long as I showed up for enrollment. Ivy helped me change my name, get a new identity, and then took me to the hospital. My wrist bore tiny scars from cutting the ropes, and my arm, broken in the fall, was badly injured, along with my cheek, which had almost been ground to the bone. I underwent several surgeries for a full recovery. Each healing period was long and painful. "Do you know how I broke my leg?" Ivy asked. She was 10 years older than me. When she was young, she too had her own dreams. But her parents left the family business to her brother and forced her into a strategic marriage when the company faced a crisis. She casually concluded, if the company needed me to sacrifice myself to survive, then it's better if I take over. Her leg was broken when her furious brother pushed her down the stairs. That night, as we sat on the balcony, she gently sighed, covering my hand, I wish I had met you sooner. You wouldn't have had to waste 3 precious years of your life for a mere $300,000 on him. After dinner, I said goodbye to Ivy. Just a few days into my tenure at the research institute, Inigo showed up again. He found me in the cafeteria, sitting across from me, staring intently at the corner of my right eye. After a while, he asked softly, "What happened to your teardrop mole?" "Oh," I replied nonchalantly, "I got hurt when I fell from the cliff." The reconstructive surgery altered my appearance. His hand on the table started to tremble. "Did it hurt?" he asked. It was an absurd question. I put down my chopsticks, looked up at him calmly, and said, "Inigo, you're the last person who should be asking that. You might have forgotten the pain I endured during those 3 years with you, but I remember it very clearly." Abusers often easily forget the harm they've caused. As I made eye contact with Inigo, I began listing his wrongs. The time I had a 39-degree fever, you were angry because Olivia hung up on you and took it out on me, saying I felt comfortable to hold while feverish. When I went out with you, your friends forced me to drink until I vomited blood. You made me take a cab to the hospital alone. I had to undergo an endoscopy without anesthesia because there was no one to sign for me. When Olivia got negative press from Rose, you accused me of orchestrating it, called me trash, and slapped me twice. And many more times. I got used to it, so the surgery to fix my wounds wasn't very painful. With each revelation, his face grew paler. In the end, the always proud and aloof Inigo, in front of me, shed tears. I felt embarrassed and looked around to see if anyone was watching. Fortunately, the cafeteria was not crowded, and we were sitting in a corner where few people could see us. "I'm sorry, Reina, I didn't see my own heart clearly back then," Inigo said with some difficulty. "Rose and those who kidnapped you have been sentenced. I will also call off my engagement with Olivia. I know she made things difficult for you on the set." I laughed sarcastically. "So, the real culprits are Rose and Olivia?" "You know very well, Inigo. The distance between domestic and overseas isn't an insurmountable gulf, especially with your wealth. Traveling there or even moving to stay with her for a few years would have been easy. If you truly loved Olivia, there were 1,000 ways to be with her, not finding substitutes or companions. You didn't love her that much, nor could you stand loneliness, so you always needed someone by your side. But you looked down on these people, finding ways to humiliate them for your psychological satisfaction." He stared at me, speechless. Finally, with reddened eyes, he said, "But Reina, I really love you now. I know I've done many wrongs to you. Give me a chance, I'll love and make it up to you wholeheartedly." I sighed, feeling he was beyond help. "You have so much yet still wasted on fruitless love and hate. Don't you understand? I never liked you, never invested my feelings in you. I willingly stayed with you because you did help me financially. But after being an unintended victim and falling off that cliff, I consider my debt to you paid off." I stood up with my tray, but Inigo suddenly grabbed my hand. He blurted out, "What do you need? Just give me a chance. Research funding, project investment, even, I'll build you a separate lab. You can work independently, free from constraints, okay?" Truly incorrigible. "Stop it, Inigo." I lost my patience and jerked my hand away. The soup from my tray splashed onto his expensive suit. I pursed my lips, looking coldly at him. "How much for dry cleaning?" "Have your assistant bring the bill to the institute, and I'll reimburse you." He sat there, disheveled, like a defeated dog, the light in his eyes completely dimmed. A few days after Inigo left, Olivia found me. She glared at me almost hatefully. "I thought you were dead." These years, he tried to break off our engagement several times, but I refused. So, he punished me. When drunk, he would call out your name, saying the one he truly loves is you. Reina, how dare you make me your substitute? I looked at her drastically altered face, the exhaustion and agitation barely hidden in her brows and eyes. After all the twists and turns, she too ended up tormented like this. As I continued to observe her calmly, Olivia's emotions suddenly collapsed. She stood up abruptly, glaring at me. Why did you come back? If you left, you shouldn't have come back. Do you know, since you returned, Inigo insists on breaking off our engagement. Stirring my coffee with a detached tone, I said, it's your narrow-mindedness, Olivia. You're stuck in a meaningless cycle of love and hate. What right do you have to question me? She glared at me resentfully, unable to formulate a response. Olivia and Inigo were cut from the same cloth. Born with everything, they never lacked anything. In their view, not being loved or not loving someone was the greatest misfortune. But all I ever wanted was a path to my dreams. I paid no further attention to Olivia, paid for the coffee, and left. That evening, I unexpectedly found myself trending on social media. Like Rose, Olivia's preferred weapon was public opinion. In her long post, she and Inigo were portrayed as long-term fiancés, and I was painted as the villain who snatched her love upon returning home. People unable to find me vented their anger by leaving messages on my institute's official page, demanding my dismissal. This person may have high academic credentials, but with such a flawed character, how can she hold an important research position? The public outcry was fierce. Some extreme fans even gathered outside the institute with banners. I handled it by calling the police. Ivy was furious. I gave her too much face. What right does a plastic surgery freak have to make such a fuss? I stopped her. Let me handle this one. Some things weren't brought to light back then, but I had kept evidence. I registered an account and posted a video. It was from the set, where Olivia, upset by a conflict with Rose, forced me to retrieve her ring from the water. A similarly downtrodden assistant had recorded the incident and secretly sent me the video. If she bullies you again, expose it, she said. These people, raised too high by their fans, don't see us as humans. 5 years ago, I didn't expose the video because I knew the real problem wasn't Olivia, but Inigo. But this time, she provoked me first. The video caused an uproar due to its clarity. Inigo also came forward, admitting that while with Olivia, he maintained a romantic relationship with me. Essentially, Olivia was the other woman, now trying to play the victim. Her reputation plummeted, losing movie contracts and endorsements. Inigo's company's stock prices plummeted. That afternoon, he even brought his former friends to apologize to me. Several well-dressed men stood at the door, bowing and apologizing. With experimental data errors and the curious gazes from colleagues and passers-by, I was already in a bad mood. I finally lost my temper. Inigo, are you sick? He looked at me somberly. Reina, I just want to apologize for my past actions. No need, I said emotionlessly. I have my own life and work now. Just don't bother me again. And handle Olivia yourself. Your relationship issues are your own to resolve. Inigo didn't truly like me. It was more about his obsession with the fact that I fell off the cliff in front of him and survived. It became a fixation for him, as if obtaining me would prove something, much like Olivia in the past. Sweeping my gaze over Inigo and his friends, I suddenly mentioned, do you remember? When I came to the bar to pick you up, your friends stopped me from leaving, insisting I demonstrate my research project. I heard from Professor Shu that my current research project received funding from you. So, I welcome you and your friends to visit my lab and see how I record data and advance the project. 8 years later, I finally retaliated against their mockery. Inigo looked at me in pain, his eyelashes trembling, unable to speak. As the twilight deepened, I stood facing Inigo, no longer in the humbled, pleading posture of the past. He took a deep breath, asking with difficulty, if from the beginning, when we first met, I had treated you equally and respectfully, lent you the money, and didn't stop you from pursuing your studies, could you have possibly liked me? Without hesitation, I replied, I would have been very grateful to you, would have returned the money as soon as possible, and helped you whenever I could. As for liking him, that was never an option in my life. For a long time, I didn't see Inigo again. The next time I heard about him, it was in the news. Olivia's life became difficult, her family pressured Inigo to marry her. Refusing at every turn, Inigo, annoyed, went for a drive to clear his mind. Unfortunately, his car's brakes failed on a mountain road, and he crashed down a cliff. Rescued in a bloodied, unconscious state, the police investigation eventually led to Olivia. She confessed. Yes, it was me. He provoked me first. Why should he abandon me for some poor imitation? The once celebrated actress, now brought low, bitterly exclaimed, if I'm suffering, he won't get off easy either. Leaning against my grandmother's gravestone, I spoke a lot, staying until nightfall. Ivy was waiting for me at the gate, having sent a black car to pick me up. Once inside, my frozen body gradually regained sensation. She asked, now that Inigo is lying in the hospital, beyond caring, do you want to change your name back? I pondered and replied, yes, I think so. Reina was the name my grandmother gave me. I still hoped that if history remembered me, it would be with that name. That night, under a cloudless sky bathed in moonlight, I once again walked on the path of my long-pursued dream. This time, I wouldn't stop.